Welcome to my YouTube channel Safety Guidelines. My name is Fahim Azam and this is my second video regarding safety tips on confined spaces. Before telling you the contents of this video, let me remind you the topics we had gone through in part 1. Those were confined spaces and their hazards, hazard controls in 3 ways, managing and controlling hazards, developing a confined space entry plan, preparation phase. And the contents of this video are entry phase, key personnel, gas testing, entrants, restoration phase. Entry phase. Once the confined space is properly prepared, ensure the following. The confined space entry permit has been completed and signed. Only authorized personnel enter the confined space. All personnel are accounted for by having the names of all entrants recorded on a log sheet upon entering and exiting the confined space. Gas tests logs are maintained as indicated on the confined space entry plan and or permits. Atmospheric gas tests are conducted periodically while personnel are in the confined space to ensure a safe working environment. Continuous monitoring must be performed when atmospheric conditions are subject to change. Entry is terminated if conditions change. If the confined space entry is suspended, the entrance to the confined space must be blocked or barricaded, and no entry signs must be posted. Hazardous conditions and activities outside the confined space must also be identified, controlled, and evaluated for their potential impact on the confined space. The two very important and key personnel for confined space entry are a supervisor and a standby man. Let's talk about confined space entry supervisor. The confined space entry supervisor authorizes and supervises confined space entry activities. The confined space entry supervisor is a work permit issuer or an individual assigned by the issuer who is responsible for directing all aspects of the confined space entry. His responsibilities are: number 1, to determine if conditions are acceptable for entry, authorize the entry, and oversee the entry operations. He also terminates the entry if necessary due to changes in the confined space atmospheric, changes in the conditions affecting work inside the space, or for emergency conditions that have occurred in the facility. Number 2, to review the confined space entry plan that is unique to the specific confined space and to communicate the plan. For example, specific confined space hazards, precautions, responsibilities, and emergency procedures to entrants and the standby man. The standby man has the responsibility to monitor the confined space entry while entrants are inside the confined space. His responsibilities are: number 1, to monitor activities inside and outside the confined space to determine if it is safe for entrants to enter and remain inside the space. Number 2, to remain at the confined space entry point and to perform no other duties that could interfere with his primary responsibilities as a confined space standby man. Number 3. To review the entry plan and applicable work permits to understand the confined space hazards, precautions, responsibilities, and emerging procedures. Number 4. To ensure that he understands the effects of exposure to potential hazardous substances in the confined space. Number 5. To maintain a confined space entry log and maintain a continuous count of entrants. Number 6. To have communications equipment readily available on site and be able to immediately notify proper personnel. For example, entry supervisor or designated rescue team in the event of an emergency. Atmospheric gas testing. Initially, entry is prohibited if gas testing indicates an oxygen deficiency or the presence of unacceptable levels of flammable or toxic materials within the confined space. Initial entry is allowed only after purging with the mechanical ventilation or cleanup has rendered the space free of hazardous concentrations as verified by continuous gas testing inside the confined space. Gas testing. Because the main cause of the death during confined space entry operations is asphyxiation, gas testing requirements must be followed as outlined below. Gas tests of the atmosphere inside the confined space must be performed and immediately recorded whenever any of the following conditions occur. Prior to entry, after breaks or other interruptions in the work, if there is any reason to believe that conditions inside the confined space have changed. At periodic intervals, for example every 2 hours, as necessary to determine whether acceptable atmospheric conditions are being maintained during the course of the confined space entry. Entrants. They are personnel from proponent, maintenance, or contractor who have been designated to enter a confined space to perform work. Their tasks include entering for inspection, taking a sample, performing a maintenance activity, or supporting operations. The entrants have the responsibility for conducting work in a confined space as per the requirements of confined space entry permit. Their responsibilities are: Number 1. To review the confined space entry permit and confined space entry plan and verify that all precautions have been properly implemented. Number 2. To clearly understand their work assignments within the space. Number 3. To never enter a confined space until they are satisfied that all necessary precautions have been properly taken to ensure their safety. Number 4. To understand the effects of exposure to potential hazardous substances in the confined space. Number 5. To understand the proper use of PPE that is to be used inside the confined space. Number 6. To maintain proper communication with the confined space standby man so that he can monitor the entrance status and observe possible behavioral effects of hazard exposure. Restoration phase. Once the work has been completed and the confined space is ready to be returned to service, use the confined space entry permit checklist to restore it. In addition to the items on the checklist, ensure the following. Number 1. All personnel have safely exited the confined space. Number 2. All tools and equipment have been removed. All manways and flanges are closed and sealed. Number 3. All isolation valves and spectacle blinds have been restored to their operating positions. Number 4. All blinds have been removed using the blind list as required by safety process. Thank you for watching my video. Please click the subscribe button. Press the bell icon to receive notification regarding further videos. Like, comment and share my video clips. See you in the next clip. Till then, have a good time. Bye.